Say my name. I am awake. I am the danger. I am the one who knocks.
Welcome to the first episode of Breaking into Breaking Bad. This is Clifford Humphrey. I'm here with my younger brother, Caleb Humphrey, and we are excited about discussing this first show, the pilot, which does not have a title. It's just known as the pilot. Before we get started, though, I did want to make a note and say that this show does have some explicit content, and we have checked the box on the podcast platform to note that. So viewer discretion is advised. I think it's rated PG-13. There's some content that you should be aware of if you've never seen the show before. That I will say is not congruent with the Christian values that Caleb and I both have, and the perspective on all that we share. But we still think this show definitely has a lot of value, and so we're excited to get into it. Before we do, Caleb, did you want to make a note about Patreon?
Yeah, so we're thinking in the near future here, making a Patreon account, and possibly put some bonus material on there. So stay tuned to that in the near future.
Okay, all right, awesome. Well, on to the first episode. So we don't really have a format we're going to follow. We're just going to kind of talk about it. I have some questions. I have some thoughts. Cabes, you've got some questions, some thoughts as well. And
absolutely.
I think the beginning is and the end are obviously really important. So we're being introduced to the story and the characters here. It starts in a funny way, right? It starts kind of in the middle of things. Yep. with the RV chase and running, racing through the desert and all of that. I think that's really to just capture your attention and make you go, what in the world how did this guy end up driving an RV in the desert without any pants on?
Yeah, I love the idea of starting like that and then going back to like, how in the hell did he get to this spot?
Yeah, genius.
I love it. I wonder if Vince Gilligan, he's the creator, writer, genius of this whole show. I wonder if he got a little bit of that from George Lucas. George Lucas always says that he hates starting stories in the beginning. He likes going somewhere in the middle. That's why you get Star Wars episode 4, 5, and 6, and then it goes back from there. I wonder if that had anything to do with it or not, but just a thought.
Yeah. So anyway, it starts in a very crazy way and it grabs your attention. One thing I wanted to talk about was, what are our first impressions of the characters? Like what are we meant to know about Skylar from our first impressions of her here, right? The first thing I think we see of her is that scene when she's making Walter eat veggie bacon.
Veggie bacon. Jeez. So I've never had veggie bacon before.
Yeah, I'm not interested. But what is that about? Like, what is that supposed to communicate?
I think, in my opinion, her matriarchal role in this family, she kind of has taken over her role and a little bit of Walter's role. And the whole veggie bacon thing, like looking after your cholesterol, at this part of the show, you don't really know why the veggie bacon. Thinking back about it, I don't even know why they put it in there. I mean, do you have any thoughts of your own on that, or?
Well, I think your point, her being a kind of matriarch, she rules the home for sure.
Mm-hmm.
If it came out later on that he struggled with high cholesterol, then we'd know, oh, okay, so she's helping him there. But that's not really his problem. It's lung cancer that comes out, right? So I don't think that's related. Right. So
yeah, and that's later. So
she's trying to control everything in a way, and
mm-hmm.
making her husband eat veggie bacon is kind of a emasculating thing. So
yeah,
maybe we're reading a little bit too much into it
too.
But yeah, right. Good point. Yeah, you'd think she'd make him some special breakfast, and he gets veggie bacon, right? Okay, what other characters? So Walter Jr.
Yep.
It's important. It's important to know what's the name of his uh, disability? Is it muscular dystrophy? I think
Cerebral palsy, I believe it is.
cerebral palsy. Okay, so
Yep.
that's a really interesting component, right? Why did they want him to have cerebral palsy? Right? It doesn't
Yeah.
seem to me.
I think I heard Vince Gilligan talk about this once. Is like he wanted to create this life of a family that was just very very ordinary, but has its own challenges. But he wanted to kind of throw in like even more of a challenges so that like you could kind of like relate in some way, but then other ways you weren't able to relate, and you just kind of had like this sense of like, man, they're going through a lot right now, and that's from what I remember Vince was talking about.
So it's an unusual problem, but it's not a
Yeah,
crazy problem, right? Like anybody can. There's a lot of people who have that. So
yeah,
um, it once all the other problems that we learn about kind of stack up, you're like you feel a lot of pity, right, for the
hmm
family. You're like, man, they really do have a lot on them. It's important to know that Skylar's pregnant, and so they're about to have their second child. And I mean, how old is Walter Jr.? He's in high school, right? So
I believe he's 15 because he's not able to drive yet.
that's
Yeah,
right.
so
But that's a lot. I mean, it's kind of weird to have two children 15 years apart.
yeah, yeah, it
So
was not a planned pregnancy at all.
okay,
So
it's not that they were trying for a long time and it didn't
correct.
work or
Yep.
something. Okay. Um, but the dynamic between Walter Jr. and his father is one that is important because a lot of what appears to motivate Walter Sr. is he wants to take care of the new baby and Walter Jr., right? So
hmm
and I think it makes it very believable. Oh yeah, of course he'd want to do that because he knows Walter Jr. is going to need help. And so he wants to set him
Yes.
up as best he can.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, what's another character that we get introduced to?
We got Hank.
You definitely got
We got
Hank.
Hank. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do
Uh,
we learn about Hank? First
yeah. Hank
impressions.
is the brother-in-law. He's married to Marie. Marie is Skylar's sister. He works for the DEA in Albuquerque, and that's where the show takes place. And he's just the laugh of the party. Has to be the loudest person at the table. Always has a joke to any kind of response or comment. Um, he just seems like the kind of guy that looks, at least appears, that he's got it made.
Mm.
Like he is exactly where he wants to be, and it's the DEA, so it's a cool thing to say. That you work for the DEA. He loves taking down bad guys. It's like probably something he's always dreamed of doing.
Yeah, I thought it was telling though. So he comes off as this super confident guy. He pulls out his gun and he's like showing everybody his gun and he's making fun
hmm
of Walter because he's like, hey, is that heavy for you? Yeah. But then when he realizes that he's about to be on TV, even though it's during Walter's birthday party, he's like, everybody has to stop everything and watch me on TV and say how cool I am. It speaks to a little bit of insecurity, I think, on his part.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that for sure.
But yeah, he's kind of a love hate guy. Like you love Hank, and he's also super annoying. I find so. But you don't know at the beginning who's going to be an important character, right? It's only as you go on.
hmm
So we're kind of saying these are the important people. So the I think the
Right.
final character we have to talk about is
Walter.
Jesse. Well,
Oh,
Walter, yeah, Walter and Jesse.
Walter and Jesse. Yeah.
So let's talk about Jesse, and then we'll go to Walter. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we
So when
don't.
you first see Jesse, you you see him jumping out of a window, and you don't really know what's going on. You just see him jumping out a window. They got the music going on, and you just see him escaping. And then he locks eyes with Walter, and they both recognize each other right away. Walter is a science teacher, a chemistry teacher, at at a high school that Jesse used to attend, and he was Jesse's teacher, and so they recognize each other, and Jesse jumps in his car and speeds off, and this was right after a drug bust that Walter went along with just to as a ride along, just to kind of see how things go, and that's all you really see of Jesse when you first start. Like there's no talking or anything. So you really don't know what he's gonna do, but
He's you know right away that he's kind of a comic relief character in a way, though, because when he
falls off the roof.
Yeah, he falls over backwards off the roof, right? While he's he's finishing making love with some random woman, and he's trying to escape from the drug bust. So anyway, there's some comic relief there. He definitely looks like a low life loser guy who, you wouldn't want your son to be Jesse Pinkman, but that's our first impression, is that he's a low life drug dealer who gets pushed around by other drug dealers. He thinks he's hot stuff. I love that he's like, yeah, the chili pepper, that's my signature move or whatever.
Captain Crunch was his
Captain Cook
was
right.
Captain Cook was on, even made that as his license plate.
Yeah, Captain Crunch, is that what you were drinking, Capes? Is that what we were talking about earlier?
Captain Crunch, wasn't that a cereal?
Yeah, it's a cereal. That's right. Okay, well then let's talk about Walter. So the most important character here, and about whom the show, is all about. So
yeah,
what do we learn about Walter? First impressions.
Oh man, this 13th time of watching it, per se, I'm 36. I have a 20, almost 21-month-old baby, married, and I feel like I kind of get where this guy is coming from in this first episode. You see him in this docile, just wake up, knows what he's supposed to do. He does, what was he do? This weird little stair climber thing with just this look on his face of just straight, I don't want to be here type of look on his face. And he just seems like this person that a long time ago he accepted where he was and never tried to better himself. He, like maybe he made a choice that put him in this position, and he was too scared to try anything else. But this is a guy that, he turns 50 in the first episode, and you don't know how long he's been in this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you would say, but just boring life. And he's got kids to take care of. He has another one on the way. He's a chemistry teacher. He wants his kids to be enthusiastic about chemistry, and not a single one of them is, because let's be honest, how many high schoolers are excited about chemistry, And he just comes across as this person that you just ultimately feel bad for, or you can kind of see a little bit of yourself in, depending on where you are in life.
Yeah. I think you nailed it when you said something like he does his duty, right? He wakes up like in the morning early to work out, and you're right. I think his first thought is, this is what I ought to do. I ought to do this thing. So he gets up and he does like a really cheesy workout, like that step thing. Like he's not really working out, but he thinks he is. And then he goes and teaches his class, and it's clear that the students don't respect him. And there's this one kid particularly who's just busy flirting with this other girl and is disrupting the class and doesn't want to be there. Yeah, and his name is Chad. It's perfect. But he doesn't make enough money as a public school teacher, and so he has to work at a car wash. And help me out here, Cabes. Is it the case that his like job is to work to sell things on the inside of the store, right?
Yeah, so he runs the register. That was his job. It's that
So
the
people
name
come
of
in
the
and
place.
buy air fresheners or something, and they
Right. Yeah. Or they just pay for their car wash and or their service, whatever they're getting paid, like if it's a detail. But yeah, they got vending machines in there and stuff like that, or if they want to buy whatever behind the counter. But he runs the register. That's his job
so that was
that
he
he
signed up
does
for.
after school. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's what he signed up for, but it's because of the nature of a car wash. There's a lot of low life people who work there, I guess, from time to time, and so they don't show up to work, and so his boss, who's kind of a jerk, is always having him, hey Walter, we need you to come clean cars, so leave the register and grab a rag and start wiping down these tires. And
Hmm.
and that's a little bit demeaning, especially for a 50-year-old man who's a chemistry teacher who obviously knows he's a smart guy.
Right.
But the most powerful scene, I think, the first half of the episode is when he's driving and his glove compartment thing doesn't close. Right?
He just keeps on smashing it.
Yeah, he's trying to close his glove box and it won't close, right? And like everybody's experience, I think a lot of people experience that, right? But it's just like your car isn't that nice, right? Like
Hmm.
your his car is not that nice. It's not a very good car, and it's frustrated. Well, and then he goes to work, and then a Corvette pulls up, and the boss makes him go and wipe the tires, and it's only then that he finds out that it's his student Chad. It's Chad's car that he's having to clean. And
Hmm.
Chad makes fun of him, and his girlfriend takes a picture of it. Says, "Look, it's Walter White, Mr. White cleaning Chad's car." I mean, it's the most demeaning thing, right? I mean, there's supposed to be I say this because I'm a teacher, right? That there's supposed to be a distinction between teachers and students, where students defer to their teachers as people who are not equal to them but have a sort of higher station, and that's why they treat them with respect and all of this,
Hmm.
and so that whole thing is flipped upside down when Walter is having to clean the tires of Chad's Corvette, which is obviously a much nicer car.
And you notice that he just takes it. He literally just takes it. Like when they're taking the
Yep.
pictures, they're like, "Hey, make sure you make those tires shine, Mr. White." Like he takes it. Like he is in this complete like walk all over me, I won't do a thing type
Mm.
of mentality.
Yeah.
And it's not like he woke up one day and he was that person. Like I think he's been nurturing this mentality over years, and this is just where he's at.
Yeah. So here's an opportunity to kind of talk about one of those enduring human questions, is that you're right. He didn't just wake up one day and decide that's going to be his life. He got that way from a long series of choices that all
Hmm.
ended up there. And in each one of those individual choices, he didn't think he was choosing ultimately that life, but it got him there.
Yeah.
And so, you're left asking, is this a life I would want? And you cringe, right, when you see it. And you're like, I wouldn't want that, and I would want that for my worst enemy, right? Like it's not that it's not like he's impoverished and his life is really difficult that way. It's that he is so weighed down with a mediocrity that is just soul crushing.
Hmm.
And it makes you think, you're right, it makes you ask yourself, like, what about my life is like that? How far? It's like, they say you could boil a frog slowly, right? And they won't notice because they're cold blooded. And it's like he doesn't realize it till he's being boiled alive, right? And that his soul is just in that place, right? And
Yeah.
then the sort of climax of the episode is the diagnosis. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even when they film it, like they kind of um you can't hear what the doctor's saying. You see in the doctor's mouth move, and so you know that the doctor's saying something to him, and Walter's just completely spacing out. Because I think even in this moment when the doctor's telling him that, listen, buddy, you have bad lung cancer, and you have 6 months tops. Like he is so spaced out at this moment that he doesn't even know what to think, how to think. I mean, he hasn't even thought a moment for himself in God knows how long. and now he's just confronted with this information that's completely turned him on his like side, because it's like, how do I respond to something like this? And
Yeah.
it's just
Okay, but something really important happens at that birthday party, and this is a question that I don't think we can answer. So all we can do is say, if you've watched the show, you have to ask yourself this question and try and answer it yourself. The question is this: when does Walter start to think about the plan to make money by making meth?
I if I had to put my finger on it, he doesn't know what to think, comes home just whatever, starry-eyed, and he's just trying to like make put a smile on his face, right? And then the commercial comes on of the bust, and it zooms in on Walter right then, and then Walter asks Hank, what kind of money did you steal? Like, did you take? And he was like, oh, like that bust, that was like $500,000. And he's just like, $500,000, like that I think could have been a small spark. I wouldn't say it was the spark, but like it's the first time in the episode that that showed him interested in something. He wasn't interested in anything. He was just kind of rolling with the punches, and all of a sudden he asked a question because he was interested, and you're like, oh. And then Hank says, why don't you come on, on a ride along? And he was like, whoa, let's not get too far, maybe someday.
Yeah, but the question is, does he start to formulate the plan? Because he's thinking, I mean, it's not spoiling anything, I don't think, for him to say, he starts to realize, okay, if I'm going to be dead in 6 months, I want to set my family up financially before I die.
Yep.
Does he have that thought when he sees that drug bust on TV? It doesn't appear, there's no way he could have been putting it all together.
No, but what he did know, so like I said, that was a small spark. And then he goes along on the ride along, and Hank and Hank's partner are talking about like the people inside, and they're like, yeah, apparently the guy inside goes by Captain Cook, whatever. And so he knows that nickname. And then when he sees Jesse at the neighbor's house jump out of the window, get in his car, and then he sees Captain Cook under there, he sees, wait a second, I know that guy. Yeah. And I know that this guy knows something about meth because they were about to catch him. And then that's when he shows up at Jesse's house and is like, hey, I'm not here to catch you, but you know the business, or at least he thinks he knows the business, and I know the chemistry. And then that's kind of how it started, right?
But here's the question, though. Why does he go on the ride along? Would the old pre-diagnosis Walter White have gone on the ride along? I would have thought he would have not had time, right? He's too busy doing all the other things.
He wouldn't have done it. Well, I mean, in this, fast forward to the very end, like you said, he didn't have time because like his day is so scheduled out piece by piece by piece. He goes to work, or he goes to A1A car wash, and then he comes home, right? Everything is scheduled. Later on at the episode, when he finally comes home, kind of fast forward here a little bit, Skylar's like, where have you been? Because
he's normally home at a certain time.
Yeah. Right. He's completely changed everything. So yeah, I don't think pre-diagnosed Walter would have gone on that thing, because he could have gone on it whenever.
So maybe that's evidence then for the thought that when the first time he saw the drug bust on TV, he formulated the plan. Maybe I could make money that way to set my family up because now I have this diagnosis.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah. No, I could see that for sure.
Okay.
And just seeing Jesse was just like an add-on at that point.
Right. Because he's just kind of curious. He's like, can I go in and see the lab? When they do the bust.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to see what people are doing.
Yeah. And he asked for that. He's like, do you think I can go in and see the actual lab?
Yeah. I think he wanted to know, how complex is the chemistry? Like, are people, how well are people doing it out there?
Well, yeah. I don't know about per se the actual like. Well, you could be right. Yeah. He was just very, very curious. He wanted to know whatever he could find out in that ride along.
one point I meant to bring up earlier. This is a side thing, but it's a good detail that I don't think is an accident. He turns 50 on the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
We learn that Skylar says that something when I turn 40. So we know there's a significant age difference between Skylar and Walter.
Mm-hmm.
What is the significance of that? I don't think that's just an accident. I don't think that's just a random detail.
I don't know about the age difference. I mean, later on in the show, you learn how they met and how their relationship kind of started, but nothing for this episode that I would say that the age thing would.
Well, to the point of like, is it even more emasculating for Walter to be ruled by not just his wife, but a wife who's significantly younger than he is, more than 20 years,
who's also kind of been taking the reins,
or more than 10 at least. Yeah.
That's why I say, like, when you see this episode, you just see a man that's just been defeated and is just kind of
here's a thought though.
along.
So obviously a big part of the show, and again, I don't think this is giving away too much, is you're trying to analyze Walter's motive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I wonder if added to the fear he has of just knowing that he's going to die, and the fear of thinking that he's going to leave his family financially in dire straits, I wonder if there's a fear that, oh man, Skylar's going to be disappointed in me. Like, I've got to do this thing. I've got to, you know what I mean? Like, because she's so controlling, right? I wonder if that's also part of like the small-minded, small-souledness of Walter.
I bet that plays a part in it. I also think, just kind of like, and you kind of hit on this, him being a man and feeling that he has not fulfilled his duty as the man of the household, the father, the husband. Like, he feels like he has failed, and he has now 6 months in his mind to fix it.
So let's talk
the only
about
thing he could. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, so on that point, let's talk about the clothing store scene.
Right. Yeah. Oh man. That's when you really see him be like, I've had enough type of personality. Yeah, like,
So what's the scene? So his son is they're gonna, Skylar and Walter are gonna buy their son new pair of
jeans. Yeah. And he's trying them on, and he can't put them on because he's got cerebral palsy. And so Skylar says, hey, do you want me or your dad to come in and help you? And he said, dad. So Walter goes in there, puts on the jeans for him. And in the background, you see these bunch of, high school bully kids, make fun of Walter Jr.'s cerebral palsy, making fun of the fact that he can't try on his own pants. And at first they're like, just, don't listen to him,
But then Skylar starts to react, and she's like, you can tell she's going to go Karen on them. She's going to go like talk to the manager and get them in trouble or something. Right.
Well, so she heads, you see Walter go out the back. Right.
Well, she starts to move, and he says, I'll handle this, or something like that.
Right.
And then to her credit, she says, okay, I'm going to let you handle this.
Yeah. Yeah. Which was weird. Right. Because maybe he's never said that before. Maybe he's always been go ahead.
She does kind of have a confused look in her face, but also I'm confused. Why does he go out the back and so he can come in the front? I mean, I thought, does he like slash the tires or something?
No. Yeah. I think it was just more of making an entrance, or maybe he was building up his, beating his chest as he's walking around the building to kind of like get ready for what he's about to do, because he's never done something like this before.
Yeah.
And,
so
he's going around the building, and then Skylar's was like, she's had it. And so she starts walking to the bullies, and right when she gets close, she stops because she sees Walter come in with just like this death look on his face. And Walter just goes freaking crazy on the guy. He kicks him in the leg and just stares him down. And this guy's taller than Walter, like looking him down.
A lot taller and a lot bigger.
He looks like a linebacker.
Yeah.
And he's like, you got one shot, punk. You better do it. You better do it right now. And the kid like limps away because Walter kicked him in the freaking knee or something.
Yeah.
Um, that was so
Yeah,
weird
so
because you've never seen somebody do like that after,
but that's
being
the
portrayed
first
as a wuss.
that's the first time Walter acts like a man.
Yeah.
He takes ownership of his family and
Hmm.
protects his family. And that's, you can tell, oh wait a minute, he's different now, right? It's like
Yeah.
again, the diagnosis doesn't, it's not like it flips a switch. It takes a little while, but that's the first like real change, that you
Hmm.
see.
Yeah. It
So
was more of a spark in his mind that made him start
mhm, mhm.
to really analyze, well, not analyze, but think differently on his responses to certain situations.
Right. So fast forward, so then he goes in the drug bust and he sees Jesse and he meets Jesse later and says, "Hey, I've got this deal." I think it's important to note this. He doesn't say, "Hey, Jesse, let's be partners and do this thing." He basically holds a gun to his face, to his head, and says, "Jesse, if you don't be my partner, I'm going to turn you in."
Yeah, he blackmails him at that point.
So there's no
He's like,
consent.
hey,
It's not a consensual like partnership here. This is he's
right,
already a
it's
gangster.
it's 50-50 or else,
Hmm,
and
hmm, hmm.
that's kind of what he did. But
So the and we'll obviously talk more about the relationship between Walter and Jesse going forward. But I think it's important to note it starts with a threat from Walter. Jesse, you will help me with this, or I will put you in prison.
yep.
So that's how they start their relationship. So then they say, okay, well, we're going to do this thing. You'll cook the meth and we'll sell it. And they have to get an RV, and they have to get an RV because they I guess cooking the meth.
Well,
They need
Walter
a
didn't even know that at first. He thought that they were going to cook it in Jesse's garage. And so
right.
he shows up with all of his equipment that he took from the laboratory at school. And Jesse's like, no, we're not cooking it here. And
Yeah.
he's like, well, what do you mean? Like a Winnebago or something? Like what? And he goes, yeah, like an RV. You need to get an RV. And
So the plan is we're going to go way out in the New Mexican desert
yep.
and cook this methamphetamine out there. And so they do that. They make some meth, and Jesse's super impressed by the quality of the meth. And from this part on, it just gets really comical. I mean, there's just lots of,
Well,
there's
there's also a part that was right before that's I think pretty important. Um, is when Jesse tells Walter, "Hey, we need an RV," and it's like, well,
yeah,
I don't have money for an RV, and he's like, okay, I'll go get some. And remember, Walter's working on a a part-time job with a teacher salary, which is, I'm assuming 30-40 grand at most, with you know all the bills that they have. Anyways, he goes and you see Walter coming out of the bank, and Jesse's parked outside, and he hands Jesse an envelope, and he's like, "Hey, how much is this?" And he's like, "That's 13 grand." And he's like, 13 grand? That's not going to be enough. And Walter's like, "This is all the money that I have." So like that in my mind is so substantial.
yeah.
Like
He went
for
all
for
in. Yeah,
him, the money is one of his most important things that he values.
yeah,
And he literally took it all out. And I mean, it's a pretty stupid move
yeah.
that, and
Because
he just gives it to Jesse in hopes that Jesse does this. And, Jesse does do it. And he ends up getting an RV. But like the conversation right then, like to me, when he hands him the check or the envelope of cash, then that at that moment, Jesse's like, wow, this guy's real. This guy actually does want, this is my chemistry teacher. He wants to actually cook meth. Like, wait, well, hold on. What's the deal? This is not normal. And he has like, what do you just like some guy with a stick up his ass just wakes up one day and breaks bad, and that was
yeah,
the
yeah,
phrase he uses.
yeah, yeah. That's
And
that, that's obviously an important scene if that's the thing from which the whole show is named.
right, yeah. And Walter's response was, I am awake. And that that was like something to me that's like, one, he took out all his money. He beat that kid's butt at the clothing store. He has made a choice that he is all in on. And it's just this is where you really see Walter take off. But yeah, the I am awake response. And that's all he says. He goes, I'm awake, and then walks away.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely I think it's the pinnacle of the whole episode.
Yep.
I mean, the diagnosis is another one, but I think that's a false peak. The true peak is when he says, I'm awake. Because what does that mean? It means he admits that he's been asleep for how many years? Right?
Yeah.
That he's been living only partially, and now
Mhm.
he's able to live fully alive. I mentioned this to you when we were chatting about this before the show, but there's this old Latin phrase called memento mori, which some people get tattooed and all this, and it means remember that you will die. And there's a tradition, going way back, that philosophy really begins when you have a mortality salience, when you are aware of the fact that you are going to die, because it's only then that you start to take life seriously.
Mhm.
And that's what happens here. And I think that's another one of these sort of enduring human things, right? Is that it's obviously the lesson here, I think, if there is one, is important. That is, we don't know how to live well unless we have some constant reminder of that we will die, and that is a regular beckoning to consider how you're living, and to note that your choices really matter, because you might not be awake tomorrow, and that changes how you ought to live, right? And so all of a sudden now Walter wants to pursue. He's willing to take risks that he would never have taken before. Why? For some reward, for some greatness, for some at this point in the show, it seems he's taking the risk. Why? For money for his family, so that they can continue their mediocre, sort of comfortable existence. That at this point, that's all he's after: the continuation of a mediocre material comfort existence for my family.
Right. Yep.
That's going to change, but right now, that's what it want. That's what he sees, is that I have to take risks if I want that, only that. But he's obviously taken a step in a direction that is going to alter not just his life, but his motives and his thinking.
Yeah. No, I mean it's funny because like when you first see it, you think, oh man, this guy just got this life-ending curse. But in a weird way, it actually ended up being a blessing,
Mm.
because it actually woke him up. I am awake, and he never would have thought of that beforehand or had anything. He would have just kept going. And it makes you wonder how many people will even get the chance to get a blessing like a life-ending curse.
Yeah.
In a way that, like, obviously I hope that doesn't ever happen for people, but like in a way that it wakes you up, and
Yeah.
and to me it's like, well, what am I doing in my own life now that like could be like the first building block of what Walter's life ended up in? Like, I don't want to end up like that. Like, I think you can kind of take some similarities from your own life out of this on what not to do.
Right.
And
Yeah. No, and it's the extreme cases that help us see the principle very clearly,
right.
when we can't see it in just the mundane life that we live.
Yep.
I've been reading some essays by a guy named James Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 7.5 years, and he had some philosophy classes before he went there, and it affected the way his experience there. And he writes in this one essay about his experience in prison, and he says that he values it, as horrible as it was, with all the torture and the 4 years of solitary confinement and all of that. He says, in all honesty, I say to myself, what a wonderful life I've led. He says, no two of us are the same, but to me, the wonder of my life is in escaping the life of this character, Captain McWhirr, from this story by Joseph Conrad. And this person, Captain McWhirr, reminded me of Walter White's life. And this is how he describes it: to go skimming over the years of existence, to sink gently into a placid grave, ignorant of life to the last, without ever having been made to see all it may contain of perfidy, of violence, of terror. And he says, and then Conrad adds, there are on sea and land such men thus fortunate and thus disdained by destiny. And as I was reading that, I was thinking about Walter White's life. He was set on a track to just sort of live that same way for how many more years, right? If he didn't get that cancer diagnosis, then he could have lived till he was 80 and maybe working all of that, working at that daggum car wash, just making his way to the grave without any kind of nobility or greatness or any kind of movement in his soul, because it was just sort of dead, that placid just death. So I think that's the right way to sort of maybe end our reflections now. We could continue talking about the details of the show, but we're assuming you've seen the episode and now you're listening to our commentary on it. So
Right.
you know what happens with the RV and the two drug dealers and how that all goes. But talking about the themes of the show and the episode, I think that's a good note to end on, to say the diagnosis was a curse, but it was a blessing too.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
Any closing thoughts, particularly, again, because you've seen it so many times, things that people should think about or be looking for in the future? So I think you
yeah, I mean, there's certain things that you should remember that they'll, like, later on, season 2, 3, 4, they'll do a flashback here and there, and there's certain things like obviously we talked about the I am awake conversation that Walter had with Jesse. They kind of come back to that later on, so I guess remember that whole piece, and but it's not a major piece, but yeah, no, I mean, that to me, like you said, it his curse came in the form of a blessing, and he figured it out more and more towards the end of the episode. And even at the end of the episode, when he crashes the RV, he walks out there with his whitey tidies and his shirt tucked in, with the gun pointed at his head, and he tried to kill himself because like that was big, because he's like, all right, I made it. Now I don't want to get caught, and he records himself like, this is not an admission of guilt. I am speaking to my family now. Like he's like, he has this like, oh crap moment, I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I knew better, and oh crap. But then he doesn't get caught. You think about when you're little and you did something, you thought you were about to get caught, but you didn't. You just kept doing it because you didn't get caught, and so he didn't get caught. And so now they're stuck with two dead guys in their RV, and filled with mustard gas.
Right. No, that's a really important point. I thought it was amazing that when he's in his freak out, I might get caught, you can see he's got a conscience still. Like he knows, he's like, this was a mistake. I shouldn't have done this. I've risked everything.
Yep.
And he's also, so it's a conscience thing, but it's also a terrified of the consequences. And he's sitting there on the road. He hears the sirens and he thinks they're cops. Turns out they're just, the fire engines coming to put out the fire that was started. But what's amazing is he does that. He puts the gun to his head and he fires.
Yep.
And it misfires, right? Because there's not a bullet in the chamber
or
something.
It just clicks, and then he fiddles with it, and then it misfires on the ground.
Right. But what's amazing is that he almost ended his life for something that was not what he thought it was, right? He thought he was about to be arrested, and therefore he thought suicide was better than going through the embarrassment of the arrest, right? But like, that's how like bad of a gangster and bad of a bad person he's not good at being a gangster at this point, right? Like he's
so bad, but at the same time it gives him this level of rush that he literally goes home, lays down on his bed, just thinking, man,
So let's talk about the sex part. Well, and what is she doing? She's selling things or something on
No,
a
she's on
laptop.
eBay. She's on eBay,
Oh,
either
okay. She's
selling or
that's
bidding
right.
on something,
That's right. Okay. So
and
she's completely engaged in like this really petty, like she gets super excited about winning the bid, right? On
yep,
eBay for some stupid thing, right? And so she's doing that while jerking him off, and that's his great birthday sex, right? Like his sex life sucks, right? And it's important that he's not the active partner in the sex act there. He's very much a passive partner. She's like she's the active one, right?
yeah,
And that's his life, that's his sex life before he is awake, right? But once the diagnosis
yes,
sets in, once he does the clothing scene, once he goes
hmm
through that whole horrible experience with the almost getting caught, almost getting killed by the drug dealers, almost committing suicide, all of that, it was such a rush, right? When he goes to bed, he's exhausted, but then he's filled with a kind of virility
hmm
that Skylar's like, where have you been and what's going on? And then he just makes love to her, right, in a very
yeah.
passionate.
Doesn't even answer her.
Does he
And
not? Yeah,
before
I don't remember that. Yeah.
before he would have given her an answer right away. But
Oh
this one,
yeah,
he
he would have
doesn't even
explained
answer,
himself. Yeah.
and he's thinking for himself, and he just
Yeah.
he embraces everything that this married man wanted to be and
Hmm.
never was,
Hmm.
and yeah, and he makes love to Skylar,
And
and
she loves it,
she
right?
loves it. I mean, you could
Yeah.
tell that she's just like,
Yeah.
where is this
This is the
man
man
I
I.
married?
Yeah. And she doesn't know that she's like helped neuter him, right? Like she's had her
Right.
part in that,
Yeah.
right? But you can tell she also is suffering under the malaise that they live in. But
hmm
she's yeah. So I think that's an important contrast, those two sex scenes, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's basically how the show ends, right? Um,
Yeah. That's the end right there, because it's, what a
so
perfect way to go out.
yeah, so he could have gone home and said, I made this horrible mistake today, Skylar. I can't believe I have to tell you this thing. I did. I'm never gonna do it again. But you end the show knowing he's not he's not remorseful. He's not going to back away from this
Right.
plan that he's set in motion.
Yeah.
And he's
He didn't
already
get
made.
caught, you know.
Right, right. And those bodies are still in the RV, right?
Exactly.
So he's gonna
But he's
have to
not
clean.
even thinking it that right now. Like, you'd think that if this was me and this just happened, I'd be going home scared shitless and not wanting to, like, talk to anybody, because just did so many bad things that I've never done before. I
Yeah,
cooked
yeah.
methamphetamine. I killed two people. I, I did all these. I took out all my life savings. I did
Right,
all these
right,
things,
right,
and
right, right,
he
right.
he was so awake that none of the consequences, or the idea of possible consequences, was even at the front of his mind. That
Mm,
he was just like, F it. I
yeah,
am here, and this is where I'm at.
right,
Because
right.
honestly, what matters if you know that you're dying in 6 months?
Well, that's it. He's got nothing to
Like,
lose. Yeah,
nothing to lose moments, which
yeah,
this is the path he chose. So
yeah. Now, Cabes, I will ask briefly. So you've had some experience with gambling. You're kind of good at it. Or
I
I
wouldn't
should
say
say,
good at it, but I enjoyed playing it.
yeah, poker,
Texas Hold'em.
poker.
Yes.
Yeah. So that moment when that situation you're in when you've got nothing to lose, right? You've got like just a so-so hand, but at the moment of the game, like you're willing to just kind of bluff it and go all in, right? Like that's a calculation you have to
Right. You
make,
you
but
weigh
there's
your
some
risks.
freedom.
Yeah.
But there's a freedom in knowing when you've got nothing to lose, right? This is the last hand I got. I'm either going to go down in a blaze of glory,
Yeah.
or I'm going to win all,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's
It's like this, like, I wouldn't necessarily call it like a dopamine rush, but you get this feeling of of a level of excitement almost, you know. And I think that was all that was a part of him, because he hasn't experienced any excitement in his life for God knows how long. And he just did like 10 things that he's never done before, all in the matter of a few hours.
Right.
That just made him, I don't care, you know, like I am awake.
Right. Okay, well, I think we should wrap it up. So that means, Cabes, we get something really exciting, which means we get to watch the next episode now.
Man, what is it, 11:47 p.m.?
maybe wait till tomorrow, Cabes. Maybe wait till tomorrow.
Might have to wait till tomorrow. Got the day up tomorrow. We'll see.
Okay, so if you're still following along with us, go ahead and watch the episode 2 and catch us on the next episode of Breaking Into Breaking Bad.